everyone, welcome to another episode of Faces of the Jewellery Quarter. We are at the Whisky Club today and we're not day drinking, obviously. So tell us a little bit about this place and its history.
Well, from what I know, it used to be part of the museum initially, which is over there. And then before that it was, I think, a workshop, and then where people used to come in and buy jewellery. So if you look over there, over my shoulder, you can see a hatch there, and that's where people would come and buy the jewellery. And I think the workshop was actually behind us here, so it's got a really, really interesting long history.
Great. So when did you choose that you were going to open a whiskey bar?
Gosh, I think it's been on my mind for years. So I started the Birmingham Whisky Club as a tasting business, an events tasting company, and that's been going on for about 6 years. And then it was about 2 years ago that I thought, right, I need my own place to do all these events. And we're having lots of events every year, and I just thought, right, we need somewhere to put them. And so I started looking, and this was actually, I think, the third place I looked, and it came from an interesting conversation with the commercial director of the Museums Trust, Alex, who is a friend of mine. And then I kind of walked in, and it was just, I think the history, the windows, where it all kind of fitted together. So it was, and it just seemed doable. The other places had actually been in a different area, still Birmingham, but there was just something about this, and I thought, yeah, we can make it work here.
Did you feel at home immediately in the Jewellery Quarter?
If I'm being completely honest, I'm from Moseley, and my office is in Digbeth, so it was a bit. I actually genuinely had to go away and think about whether I could make it work in the Jewellery Quarter. But I'm very glad that I chose to be here, because I think at the time there weren't as many bars opening as there are now, and it's a much more kind of vibrant place. I mean, it's always had the residentials and the offices, but bar-wise, I think with some of the other people that have come in since I started this project, it's made it much easier place to kind of to set something up.
Yeah.
And now, knowing it a bit more, I think it was just because I didn't know it very well. I wouldn't come over here. You know, my stomping ground is Moseley, so I would go out have an evening in Moseley. So I didn't know, but I think now I'm kind of here and I'm meeting people, and there's a real sense of community, especially around the bars, and people kind of associated with the Jewellery Quarter. It's I feel very like I've kind of stepped into a bit of a family, so and in that way it's lovely. So yeah, very, very glad to be here.
Many businesses in the Jewellery Quarter say that there is a very much a feel family and community, which is great.
Yeah, and it's a kind of a shared purpose of wanting people to come here, and whether it's to live, to work, to set something up, and everybody wants the same thing. So it is, and it's like a nice sort of suburb in a way, a very kind of creative suburb of the city centre. So yeah, enjoying it.
Awesome. And in terms of clientele, do you have a lot of people from the Jewellery Quarter, or they come from outside it?
A bit of both. We've had a good following over the years anyway for our events, and we are partly, not exclusively, a membership company, but we have our own members who've been with the club for a long time. But we have had people sort of saying, oh, this is going to be dangerous, I only live 10 minutes down the road. So that's good. Some businesses are popping in, but it's a bit too early to tell. It's only been a couple of weekends since we've been open, but the more people are walking past and sort of popping in, we'll get sort of random people kind of opening the door and like kind of curiously looking in, which is nice. I say, what is this? You have whiskey on your shelf, I guess. And then they'll probably come back. I'm sure they'll come back.
That's great. We always want people to come back.
Oh yes.
All for the whiskey. And in terms of the community that follows you, you said that you've got quite a lot of members that follow you around, and you're quite famous worldwide. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I guess I'm fairly well known in the whiskey world, which is really nice.
There's worse places to be fair.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I do kind of. I still get occasionally people yelling across the street, "Oh, whiskey woman," which is like, "Oh,
whiskey woman."
It's fine. It's a burden, But I run a big festival. People mainly know me for a festival called Whisky Birmingham, and that was internationally recognised last year, which was amazing. So, a trade magazine, Spirits Business, said that we Whiskey Birmingham was compared or put up in the same breath as Paris, Tokyo, Los Angeles, all these amazing whiskey festivals from, you know, global whiskey festivals run by all these international companies, and then they mentioned Birmingham, and that was incredible. Absolutely incredible. Yeah, and we didn't know they were doing it either.
So there's Peaky Blinders and then Whiskey Birmingham. Those are the claim to fame.
Yeah, the claim to fame. Yeah, that's all you need to know. Yeah. No HS2. It's all about.
I love it. It's really the important thing.
Absolutely,
about
yes.
this place
Yes.
and our people.
Yeah, I like that.
Awesome. So what is the next step? Obviously, you've only just opened.
Yep.
You're quite a recent addition to the Jewellery Quarter.
Yeah.
But what is the next step? I've seen that you're going to start selling bottles eventually.
Yeah, we will do. So the long-term plan is that we will retail, so we'll be able to offer so people can come in and then choose whiskey from one of those shelves there and take it out. And then really it's to get, so we've got our tasting room down there, which is where all of our tasting events will go. So the next step for the rest of this calendar year is making sure that that space is full with people learning about whiskey as much as possible.
So you're going to do lessons as well?
Yeah, so we will start up our tutor tastings again. So we work with brands very closely. And we bring them into the city, and they will educate people about the whiskey. They'll tell stories of the distilleries, other stories that are very funny, but mainly it will be about people learning how to nose and taste whiskey properly. So that's like the whole idea for this bar is based on these tasting events. So it's always about, it goes back to letting people learn and educate and ask questions, and always have people in the space that can answer those questions. But the events will be the kind of the really, well, I was going to say the fun bit. I mean, the bar's the fun bit as well. But
drinking is the fun
drinking is the fun bit, whether it's the bar or the tasting room. And I'd like to. So we've sold it. So we have memberships. We're not, you know, anyone can come in at any time or go to an event. But we do have the memberships as well, and it'd be nice to, you know, meet the membership. We've sold over half at the minute, which is fantastic. So it'd be nice to start getting to know those people well, and making sure that they're well catered for, as well as people who are non-members, hearing from them. So we're having something that we're calling the annual Dramas meeting, which is modelled on an AGM, and it's their chance to come and tell us what they want to happen in the space. It's, you know, what whiskies do they want, what brands do they want.
Very interactive.
Yeah, very interactive. Yeah, they've already started jotting things down. So we know that coat hooks are an important part of the experience, so we get coat hooks. But for me, it's meeting locals, it's meeting people like you guys, and making this. Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of this bar is that it is a home from home for whiskey lovers. That's the kind of the moniker, and it's about creating. You know, people can come in on their own, read a book, and have a cup of tea. And a whiskey, obviously. You know, they can sit here for hours and just read the paper if they want. They can come in on their own. They can come and bring groups. They can come with their partners. You know, there's a place for everybody.
Great, an all-inclusive whiskey experience.
Yes.
I like it. So you were supposed to be called the Whiskey Library to begin with.
Yeah, it was one of the names that kind of I was toying with, and then we've just kept the name that we've always had, which is the Birmingham Whisky Club. Purely because we built up such a following, I didn't want to change everything and then people to get confused. So for now, it will just remain the Birmingham Whisky Club.
Even though there is a lot of books.
There are a lot of books, yeah. In fact, if you go to other bars, my collection is okay, but I've got my own loads of the whiskey books. So it kind of adds to the educational piece around whiskey, and people coming in, and you can learn, you can taste, but then you can go and grab a book off the shelf and do your own research. So I want to make sure that that's a really kind of well-stocked library. So at one point it was going to be the Whiskey Library, and it was based on when we're fully operational, we're going to have tasting flights that we're calling Whiskey Stories. So you'll be able to come in, and it will be kind of a self, because normally we would do the tutor tastings, but this is, you can get your 4 whiskies, you have a nice little presentation of all the tasting notes, and you can just taste through it at your leisure, so it won't just be a sort of tutored flight, if that makes sense. And those are our kind of stories. That's how we kind of talk about whiskey. I always find whenever I go to a distillery, it's a story. Every whiskey is a story, has its own, you know, extremely unique history, so it's a good way of kind of discussing whiskey and helping people to understand it, I think. When
did your passion for whiskey start? Before you started with the festivals?
I think, to be honest, I was going to say, it's been around me all my life. No, I was guess my uncles and my father drank whiskey, but not if they weren't, I wouldn't say they were whiskey aficionados. To be honest, it came from my own curiosity. I was setting up a business, and I was actually setting up a bigger business at the time when I first started the whiskey stuff. It was about 6.5 years ago now, and it was more, the passion came out of the idea for the business. So I'm quite honest, I had an interest and I knew that it would work with the business model that I had, but I certainly didn't have a massive understanding of it before I had the idea, which some people find a bit curious, but I think it kind of made sense because it kind of made sense as a business opportunity, and then the sort of passion grew from there.
It doesn't matter how it happens as long as it
No, but it's what did happen, and that I guess the important thing is that it was part of a more generic and general food and drink events business. So I would deal not just in whiskey, I would do lots of other events and festivals where wine, gin, that kind of thing, cooking, dinners, that sort of thing. And actually the part that worked was always whiskey. And it wasn't meant to work. It wasn't meant to be the thing that worked. Whiskey was only meant to be part of a much bigger company. And I always felt straight away, I felt a connection to the whiskey world, and that's the people, obviously the drink itself, I find it extremely interesting. And as I was saying, each whiskey has its own story, and that's something that's very easy to connect to. And the rest of the stuff wasn't as interesting, and I found it really difficult to sort of get excited about the rest of it. So I made a decision, as I was looking for this, I had to just stop everything else. And that's when things started to really kind of change. And people only ever knew me for whiskey, even if I was doing a wine event. They'd be like, "Oh, you're the whiskey woman, aren't you?" And it's like, well, today I'm wine. But yes, I'm normally whiskey. And so it was the response to that people, whatever I did, no one wanted to talk to me about anything else. People only wanted to talk to me about whiskey. And the more time I spent with people in the whiskey world, the more I fell in love with it. So it was a happy kind of thing that sort of happened over a few years. So
when I see you in the streets, then I'll just point at you and just shout,
say whiskey.
Oh, whiskey
yes,
woman.
I will answer to that. That's completely fine.
As a whiskey expert, how should we drink this glass?
You want to drink this glass? Okay.
How should we appreciate it properly?
We should appreciate it properly by giving it a good. So if we're going to do this properly, we will look at the colour.
Okay.
So this tells us a lot of things about the whiskey. So it can tell us about the cask. So we're actually drinking a bourbon. So this is quite a high ABV, so that's a high alcohol content bourbon. So yeah, you might not be wanting to get back to work later. And then we're actually using a really nice rocks glass today. Normally if I do tastings we would use a slightly different glass, but we'll pretend we're using a proper tasting glass. So what you need to do is give it a good old sniff, and when you're smelling the whiskey, keep your mouth open, and you'll find that the flavour, the nose on it changes.
Yeah, it does change.
So you get a bit more of so that kind of helps the smell kind of circulate.
Smells delicious.
Yeah, okay. And then what you need to do, so I'll talk you through this bit and then you can do it.
Okay.
So take a little bit into your mouth and almost treat it like mouthwash. Keep it in your mouth for a good couple of seconds, give it a good swish, and then swallow. And I'll do it with you.
Oh, it's beautiful.
That's strong. It's my first whiskey of the day.
First of many.
Yeah, first of many, yeah, probably. So I wouldn't normally, sometimes it's absolutely fine. So this is, your eye's starting to go.
I'm just gonna start
So this
dancing.
is, bourbon has this beautiful colour because they use charred casks, and that lovely smell that you can get. So bourbon is very different to a single malt. They use a different grain, so you've got corn instead of malted barley, which is predominantly used in Scotch. So that was lovely kind of caramel tones. That's coming from the corn and then from the charring of this cask. So what you need to do now is have another sip, because unless you've been out boozing all afternoon, you need a bit. You almost need to kind of
you got me.
sort of kind of do once, and that kind of coats your mouth with the alcohol, and then the second time you should be able to kind of pick out the flavours. But always kind of give it a little bit of time, give it a couple of seconds, do the sort of making sure your mouth is being coated.
Yeah, every sip tastes different. Which is just beautiful.
And I would say if you're kind of doing a proper whiskey tasting, maybe not start with such a high ABV whiskey. Would ease you in gently. But whiskey has to be 40% ABV, so
Okay.
and there are many whiskies that are kind of 40% on the nose, so maybe start with that next time. We'll build up to 50%.
Thank you, I'll come again.
Yeah, there you go. That's my sales pitch. But yeah, the bourbons, we've got a number of bourbons as well. But yeah, it's all about kind of thinking about it and letting those flavours, like recognising those flavours as they kind of work. So you're kind of looking here, what's going on here, what's going on in your tongue, and then what's going on the finish. And they should all be, or can all be, different. And it's sort of getting your brain in tune with what's going on and creating
A lot of awareness.
yeah, creating awareness and your own dialogue as well. So there are a lot of people who are like, oh, you know, it's a bourbon, so therefore you will taste X, Y, and Z, and you probably will. There are, you know, if you're drinking a bourbon, you can have one kind of area of flavour profile, but if it's a Scotch, it will be something slightly different, and there are a number of reasons why for that. But it's also really important that you build up your own dialogue about things. So if you're in a tasting and somebody says, oh, I can taste peaches, and you're like, I can't taste peaches. Neither of you are wrong.
The same taste.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone is completely different, and that's one of the things I love about whiskey. It's very subjective. So you could say, "Oh, actually, I've got a real taste of tarmac." You know, you could be tasting. I mean, those are two extremes, but you could very genuinely be tasting and getting a sense of something completely different. And if you think about whiskey, is very memory based. So I have a lot of people in tastings, and they'll be like, "Oh, it smells of old libraries," and they're probably, it kind of links. Your brain is such a. It's fascinating to go through that with the tasting experience with people, it conjures up such rich memories and descriptions as well. That's what I find fascinating, and I don't find that with any other drinks. I think that's one of the reasons I like whiskey so much. It's very kind of evocative and very descriptive as well, but it's so personal. So people sit there, and people who haven't necessarily tasted stuff before, suddenly they're kind of, it's like a leather book that I've just opened new, and it's like those are real kind of genuine things that they're kind of thinking and smelling. So that's the very interesting. I'm drunk already. That's the very interesting part of it.
That's incredible. I mean, if you want a very passion-filled experience, or you simply want to drink, or you want to learn more about whiskey, this is the place to be. So how can people reach you?
Well, they can just walk in if they like. That's always a good way. Website, we are on. We're at the Birmingham Whisky Club, No E in Whiskey, and on Twitter and Instagram we are Whiskey Brum. And then, no, that's it, isn't it? Do I have any other social channels?
I don't know.
Facebook. There we go. I forgot about Facebook. Is the Birmingham Whisky Club as well.
All right, we're just gonna keep going with our drinks. And I'll see you next week with another episode of Faces of the Jewellery Quarter.